Last week I was part of an interview with Prime Minister Modi for Business Today's special issue on the G20. And one of the key headlines was that the Prime Minister saw India's G20 as a catalyst for the emergence of a new world order. Do you really see a new world order emerge over the next few years, with India playing a far more important role than it has in the recent past?
There is certainly that possibility, but I don't think it's a guarantee. Look, the old order is changing. You cannot have a world order which was as dominated by the West as we have had for the last 75 years. But the new order is still coming into being, and there are a few key questions that people are trying to figure out about this new order. First, who will be part of it? Who will be the leading powers in that system? Will it be all the major powers of the world, or will it be the major powers of the world that share some values and some interests? And relatedly, what is the world order about? Is it just about management of problems, dealing with issues of trade or customs unions? Or is there an aspiration to try to make it, lead to a more rule-based world, a world in which there are greater norms, there are values? This has been a tension at the heart of the construction of a world order ever since 1945. So the United States sets up this rules-based international system. The Soviet Union basically kind of defected. And so for 40 or 50 years, you had a group of countries, mostly the West, but some others as well, participating in that. Then it opened up to almost everybody. Now it seems to be closing down again, with Russia and China trying to find their own path. So there are two issues here. One, will India be able to play that role? And does it have both the hard power, but also the soft power, the ideas, the agenda? And then secondly, what is that agenda? What is India trying to do? What is it trying to, what kind of a world is it trying to help construct?
At the India at 100 Summit, I interviewed someone you know well, Borge Brande, the president of the World Economic Forum, who said that in the next 10 years, the World Economic Forum sees India becoming a $10 trillion economy, and the new world order, which we just spoke about, being defined by what he called the G3, the US, China, and India. Do you think that this is the inevitable direction in which things are heading, that this G3 then determines the rules of engagement in this new world order, or do you think it's a bit premature to just come to the conclusion that there indeed will be a G3 in that order?
Well, there's no chance that there will be a G3. I have great respect for Borge. He's a friend, but it makes no sense. The United States and China are not going to create some kind of condominium in which they agree to run the world. That possibility is long gone, and India will not be joining it. Look, this is one of the reasons I described the world when I started to think about how these changes were taking place as a post-American world. Because really, the truth is, it's a much messier world than what that implies. The G3 suggests some kind of order, these three big powers setting the agenda, everyone else quietly listening. That's not going to happen. First of all, the US and China can't agree on anything right now. Secondly, Europe is a huge player. Europe is still, remember, 25% of global GDP. It has enormous soft power in terms of the ideas it has, the foreign aid it gives. It's also cohering now in the face of both Russian aggression, but also the Chinese challenge. Japan is not going to sit quietly by. So the truth of the matter is, the world we're in is one where even the middle powers, Turkey, Brazil, Indonesia, think they have a voice, think they have a stake, and that they deserve to be represented at the table. That's why I think Prime Minister Modi's point about the G20 is very well taken. The G20 is the kind of organization that could reflect this new post-American world, because it's large enough to take into account, the countries that are not first-tier powers, but are still not going to be simply pawns on somebody's chessboard. Saudi Arabia is not going to quietly follow Washington's diktats anymore. But it's not going to follow Beijing's diktats anymore, and it's not going to follow New Delhi's diktats. So we have to capture a framework and an institutional structure that reflects the reality that everyone wants to be heard and represented, and that's why you're going to have a wider grouping than you had in the UN Security Council, for example, which was just 5 countries.
You know, we've seen over the past few days an announcement that BRICS would be expanded to include Argentina, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the UAE. Some of these countries are philosophically at odds with each other, Iran, Saudi Arabia for one. How do you see this play out? India is a member of the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, also a member of BRICS, at the same time a part of the Quad, whereas the core philosophies and objectives of some of these multilateral bodies are actually quite different from each other, and India at this moment wanting to have its foot on both stools. Can that continue, or do you think it's inevitable that you'll have to pick one stool?
Look, there's enough goodwill toward India. India is powerful enough, and it's crucial enough in terms of the nature of the new geopolitics because of the rise of China, that it can, to a certain extent, have its cake and eat it too. But it needs to think through what is strategically the best for India. So something like BRICS is really a kind of nonsense organization, if I can be honest. I mean, the term comes out of a Goldman Sachs economist who predicted that these were going to be the powerhouse economies of the future, which, by the way, has turned out to be completely untrue. The second letter in BRICS is Russia. Russia is in free fall, economically, demographically, technologically. So the idea that you're going to have a new world order, that is going to be defined by Russian power seems to me really, really unlikely. Then, as you say, it's been expanded now to include countries that are, not only have very different views, but some of which are very pro-American, the Gulf states, some of them, like China, are trying to turn it into an anti-American organization. I don't think it will go anywhere. I think the idea that you would have a common currency out of the BRICS is completely fanciful. It's not going to happen. So what India needs to ask itself is, what is its basic core strategic objective? And I would argue India's core strategic objective should be to align itself with the leading powers in the world that are also democratic, that are also value-based, because not only will that give India the biggest economic boost, India has to choose, in a sense, at least technologically, which sphere it's going to be part of, the Chinese sphere or the US sphere. And it's already chosen. It's chosen the US sphere. India is going to have to choose in terms of its broader industrial base, where it is orienting itself, where it's going to have supply chains. And it is already choosing to be part of the democratic world, the free world, the world of, kind of rule of law, etc. So if that's the case, it is going to get much greater benefits if it aligns itself clearly and coherently and consistently in that direction, while, of course, maintaining very good relations with China. Look, the US has a $700 billion trade relationship with China. Nobody is asking India to choose in those terms. India needs to have a strong economic relationship with China. But I think that one of the reasons that there's so much goodwill toward India in the world is because there's a sense that this is a rising power coming out of Asia, representing the aspirations of 1.4 billion people, but also one that has historically espoused universal values, human rights, democracy. This is not irrelevant to India's appeal. And so it should capitalize on that. And as I say, from a purely self-interested point of view, if you had to choose one technology ally in the world, the US or China, it seems to me the contest is pretty clear. The US is the absolute dominant country. And the US has enormous goodwill toward India. And there is going to be, I believe, a real kind of tech corridor between India and the US, just as there is, for example, between the US and Israel, the US and Western Europe. So there's a big potential for India, but it does need to clarify strategically where it wants to go.